Okay.
We are live today. So, welcome everyone who's joining us. And we'll start with introductions as people are jumping on since it's just now the top of the hour. So, I'm Amanda Painter, and I'm the co author of The Retention Process. And this is my co author, Brenda Hare. Excuse me. So, today we're talking about retention, which is what this book is all about, the retention process. This book is book 3 in a 4-book series that follows the employee journey. So we take you from hiring, onboarding, retention, and then exit. So we'll dive in today, though, pretty in depth into retention. And retention is a very broad topic, right? Um, there's there's a lot that goes into that. So today we're more specifically talking about culture, and if you're aware of your culture and how can you assess your culture, and all of those things combine into how you can return that into retention strategy.
Yes. I think most people think that retention is all about financial promises or raises and that type of thing. And they miss the culture aspect altogether. They miss, the day-to-day operations of a company altogether. And so this is a great topic to dive into.
Yes. And definitely retention, a lot, as you said, financial, but then, and let's also be very realistic about it, is that it's not about perks. Now, those don't necessarily hurt, right? But it's not about pizza parties and jeans on Fridays, right?
Right.
We've got
Yeah, that does not compensate for the fact that you treated your employees like crap the day before. Like that just doesn't. And that's really what I think so many of these businesses are trying to do is, compensate for poor behavior otherwise in ways that they think their people want. And really what they're doing is demeaning their employees altogether.
Yes. Yeah. Pizza on a pizza party on a Friday wearing jeans isn't great if you also required them to stay late and were bothering them on Tuesday evening while they were trying to do something with their family. Like it's not an equal balance by any means. So that's what we're really going to get into, is culture and how that impacts this. So we are live. We can see comments. As you all have questions, feel free to drop those in, and we will pause every once in a while and get to those questions and get caught up, and hopefully address any questions or comments that you have. But first, why does engagement really matter? So one quote statistic that we'll lead with today is that highly engaged teams show a 21% greater profitability, and that came from a Forbes study. So that's why it matters. Obviously, we want to build places where people want to go to work. It's still work. Work is work, and that's why we compensate people. But also, we want to build a company that will be more profitable. That's the whole point of having a company. So in order to do that, you've got to really have a strong team that's engaged, that wants to be there. Everyone's working towards the same mission. And that's where that effective engagement really comes into play, as far as how to engage your employees and retain them in the workplace. So for those of you who are joining us, if you registered ahead of time, you received an email with the tools that we're going to discuss today. And these tools come from the book that we have, and they're a digital download for you to use. If you have not registered, but you are joining us, I will drop the link right now that you can register. And after we are finished today, we will send out a replay of this. So you have that handy. And then also we'll include the tools in that email again, so that you have access to those if you haven't registered for those yet. So that is in the comments. Feel free to go ahead and do that. And then that email will come out later today once it's ready to go.
But if you have it, open it, you can follow along as we dive in.
Yes. So let's talk about this culture assessment that we have in this tool today. And, when we talk about giving our team surveys, some people may roll their eyes. They're like, oh yeah, I get those surveys. Does anybody read them?
Mm-hmm. What becomes of it?
What becomes of it? What happens after the fact? Or does it just go in the trash? And we developed this culture assessment to, well, obviously we say anytime you survey your employees, don't survey your employees unless you intend to act on it. And that does not mean you have to take every suggestion. You do not have to do every single thing that everybody wants or suggests, because that would also not be very practical. And that's why the leadership team needs to come together, assess what these things are, and decides what's best for the company as a whole. But
Yeah, I think we should back up for a minute though, because we've both experienced this before, that if you're going to put an assessment out there, you have to be emotionally intelligent before you even put it out there. Because when you get an assessment back from your employees and it doesn't match what your perceived culture is, it can be crushing for some visionaries, and send them off in a whole different way and really drive a bigger wedge. Maybe they didn't think there was a wedge before, and that's usually the problem, right? They don't think there's a problem at all. But when the employees bring it up, then the visionaries or the CEOs or whoever starts almost resenting the employees because of their honest opinions and their feedback. So before you prepare this assessment for your own company, before you're brave enough to send it out, you need to remind yourself why you're doing it. Ultimately, it's for your bottom line, and be open to the feedback that you're going to get. And we talk about that throughout the series, that feedback is so valuable. And this is one of those experiences where you have to be emotionally intelligent to handle it.
definitely. And you can't take it's as hard as it is to not take it personally, you really have to be able to, while some of it may feel personal because it may come down to behaviors of a leadership team or a person in management or something along those lines. Overall, you've just got to be able to take the feedback, because if you're asking for feedback, you're going to have both spectrums, and you've really got to go into it knowing I asked for this, and I asked for this so that I can motivate change and positive change and to make progress towards our goals. And you can't look at it as someone who's trying to tear you down, because that's not the point of this. The point of this is, what is our culture? How can we build on it? What can we improve? What are we doing well? And highlight those things too. So it's not always negative, but you've absolutely got to be prepared for that. That is a very good point. So we have a culture assessment in the tools today, and I'll share my screen here in a few minutes and walk through our suggested questions that we have on here. And let's take a minute though and talk about, like, what is culture? And I think that's a word that's
Let's ask, we have several people watching live. Let's ask real quick. Just and maybe you can't answer because maybe your boss is watching, or maybe you're the boss and you don't want your employees to see. But if you can answer honestly, like, would you rate your culture in your company now? Let's just do it on a scale of 1 to 10. How would you rate it? Positively being 10, it's a positive culture. Everybody's moving in the same direction. It feels really good to show up to work. Or 1, where's the door? Like, let's just rate it. If you're brave enough, and if you feel comfortable, drop it in the comments and let's see where they are in their own workplaces.
I think that's a great point. We'll see who's brave enough to do that. So part of culture, and this is in part of the tools that we have today, is in understanding your culture and being able to retain a team, is that when you've got to get down to your core components of the company. And this doesn't mean just naming them. You have to understand them, and something
Live
we
by them.
live by them. And yes, live by them and understand, live, and then can carry it out and can communicate it to your team. Because if you can't articulate it, not what the pretty words on the wall may say, in the break room. That's not what core components are really about. Now, that may look nice, but are you living it? Can you communicate it? And top to bottom, everyone in the company. So when we talk about core components, we're talking about mission and vision and your core values. And if you have not identified these yet in your company, now's the time, because this is the basis of your culture, and you can't build a thriving team or a thriving business until you have really established your core. And you've got to be able to explain it and articulate as to what that actually means. So,
And we talk about that throughout the series. So if you need support on that, it's probably a great thing to dive into the entire series and really take a look at what your core values are, how to set your core values up, how to assess the star players in your company to really know that you have core values that are applicable in your company. As Amanda said, sometimes people will dream up these great statements and they'll put them on the wall, and it's like what they wish their company was, but they don't even act that way, much less do their employees act that way. And so this is the time to like mirror the truth, right? This is the time where you're saying, is what we're saying actually what we're doing? And is it translating to not only our employees, but to our clients and customers? This is like the raw reveal vulnerability moment in your company. And if you don't have those core foundations set up, then you don't even know what you're looking at, really.
mhm, absolutely. All right, checking. I don't see comments.
Any brave souls
I don't
yet?
think
Yeah, I don't see
any,
any brave souls either.
I don't think
They're
they're brave
probably
enough.
afraid their boss is watching. So I'm going to take that as a probably mid to low level culture situation going on, because if it was a positive, right, everybody would have been dropping tens. And
Yeah.
so this is a great example of why we need to be here today, because they're not experiencing tens in their workplace right now.
Yeah, or even an 8 and 9. I mean, 10's hard. 10's
It is.
hard,
Yeah.
So even an 8 and 9 with aspirations to increase, even a 7, seven's pretty solid, like, you know?
Yeah.
So that I think that in itself is a great point, that if you're not willing to publicly say, "Hey, yeah, this is where we are," then obviously some work on the culture needs to happen.
Yeah, and what does it say to, like, we've discussed this before, when people are hiring, or, a company will come to us and they'll be like, okay, we want to hire new people. And we're like, okay, great. Let's start with your internal team, and then let's start with people that they may know, because if they're great employees, they're going to know people that are similar to them, right? And if your employees won't share your job descriptions in the real world, or won't tell people about your company to come work for your company, that's a red flag. Like, they don't love your company enough to wear your company t-shirt out in public because they don't want people to know they work there. They don't want people to know where. You've got to pay attention to those types of things, because if your employees aren't cheering for your company, there's a problem in your culture.
Yes, I think that's very indicative of, if we're not willing to say it outside, what is happening behind closed doors.
Right.
So, okay, we will take that as in everyone who's here is here because they know that they need to work on it, which that means you're in the right place. So,
Yes,
job well
absolutely. You're
done
not
on
alone. I've been there. That's why we wrote the book.
job well done, and that's why we're moving in this direction, right? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show our suggested culture assessment. Obviously, this is something you should take and rework for your company. It's a great foundation, but you may have some intricacies that some of these don't apply, or you really need to add some things that have to do with your company. And a lot of it's, are you all in person or hybrid or all digital, and how you work and how many employees you have, and is it a lot of part-time employees, seasonal employees? All of these really impact the culture, so you may need to adapt it to really fit your unique company. So, but we'll start here. I'm gonna kind of pick a couple and talk on them, and Brenda, stop me if there's a specific one you really want to dive into a little bit more in depth. But the first one, obviously, and this is what we mentioned, is that our culture is a healthy reflection of those core components. And that's why we're talking about mission, purpose, core values, your brand uniques, and your vision. So if those 5 things have all been identified, which broad topics and then many things under them, do you really feel like the culture is reflective of them? Have they been named and are living, or have they been named because they're aspirational and it looks good on paper, but we're not doing it? And for this assessment, we suggest rating 1 to 5. 1 is weak, 5 is strong. And then at the end, your team will tally their scores, you will tally their scores, and you'll get a score for what they feel. And then you look at everyone across the board and bring all that together to get what your average is.
Absolutely. And let's give them a practical thing here too. So if you're in the leadership, is let's say you're in C-suite, you're in the leadership team, whatever that is for your company, and you're just like, okay, I don't know that we're here yet, then this is a great assessment answering these questions among yourself first. So
Uh-huh.
if you're a solo business owner and you're the leader and you have some employees, do this assessment yourself first. If you can't score well on this by yourself answering this, you can look at number one and say, we don't even have a mission statement. I don't know what our core values are. Then you already know there's an issue. So why roll it out to your team? Fix some of these things internally, and then maybe 6 months from now, roll this out to your team. But you can take it yourself, you can take it with your leadership team, start there. And then when you feel confident that, you know what, I think we're making some good progress here, moving in the right direction, then you can roll it out to your entire team. But if you already know you're failing, why add salt to the wound and ask your team to,
If you,
yeah,
there's no need to assess further if you are already now.
yeah,
And this is where you've got to be very honest with yourself if you're
yeah,
assessing. Like you can't giving yourself tens on something when that's not the reality is that's going to be indicative of the kind of culture that you're going to lead. So you've got to be very honest with yourself. And yeah, sometimes it's a hard look in the mirror
it
and
is.
can be tough, but you've got to be able to do that. That's where even the feedback from yourself can be negative, and you've got to be able to be emotionally intelligent enough to handle that as well. Uh,
Absolutely.
so, um, one on the list is that our team clearly understands our mission, which is your most important assignment that the company as a whole is working on. And I think this gets lost in a lot of companies, especially the larger you get. Well, and I think it's actually on both ends. It's the larger you get, but then also the teeny tiny ones that, it's an entrepreneur who started and maybe they hired an admin and then maybe they hired somebody else and they've got somebody else doing social media graphic design. And a lot of these times these people may be contract workers or they started as contract workers and then moved into actual employees. And to them, a lot of times they're just doing tasks.
Mhm.
It's tasks.
And to them, that is their most important assignment. They figure my job description, this role I sit in, is my most important assignment, but they don't know the company's most important assignment, what it is as a whole that we're working towards. And what that does when you help them understand that is it binds them to your company in a way, right? They now feel emotionally invested in the company because they are serving a bigger picture. They understand why there's deadlines. They understand why there's quality controls, in place. They understand some of these things that you're asking of them because they see the bigger picture. So you as a leader need to help them understand the bigger picture so that they see how what they consider their most important assignment ties into your bigger most important assignment. But you first have to nail that down. And it may be like Amanda said, when you have a large company, you may have divisional assignments, right? You may have like this division serves this division serves this, but then as a whole, your company, obviously there's some umbrella that all of those fit under. I think of like medical supply companies. My husband works for a major medical supply company and there's a cardiac division. So they have their mission, what they support, right? Because they are all about the heart and helping people in that way. But then there's also like brain device stimulators that I don't know what that department's called, but they have that section, right? And so that section has its own unique assignment that they're working towards. But as a whole, the company is helping people make medical advances, right? As a whole, this is what they're doing. And so hopefully that helps explain it, whether you're a small company or a big company. You've got to have that as a whole. What is it as a whole? What is your most important assignment?
Yes, definitely. And you've got to identify and then communicate it. And it's not just communication isn't just telling. It's
Absolutely.
it's explaining and supporting your hires as to where do they fit in the picture and how does this one task that they do impact everything else in the company. And when you do that, that's when they become to have ownership, not of their task, but of their task plus how they fit into the puzzle. And that's how you build engagement. And engagement leads to retention, and retention leads to better profitability.
And I think one of the most important things with this is that you as a leader or visionary or whatever your role is, there, you have to, like Amanda said, it's not enough to communicate it with words, but you have to communicate this with actions. So I know for me as a visionary, I know our most important assignment, but I'm an idea person. So I can have all these different ideas, and that's where you have to filter them through, rein them in, make sure that you're not leading your people astray with your actions while you're over here saying, our mission is this. And then they're like, well, yesterday I saw you doing this, and, or you asked me to do this, and that doesn't align at all. So you have to make sure that what you're asking of them is aligning with what you say that your mission actually is.
Yeah, definitely. Um, one on here, and this is one that's we have discussed many times before in previous work that we've done, is that we protect our core values with proper accountability across the company. And some examples of this, and we give these examples in the book as well, is, you identified your core values, you work on communicating that and helping your team understand it. Um, it's the accountability of protecting them. So
Mhm.
with core values, it's not just this is what we're trying to do or strive for. A lot of times that means things you won't do because that would not protect your core values. And some examples on this would be firing the person that, even though they may be a good salesperson, they're toxic to your team
Mhm.
because they may be making sales, but how they behave is not in line with your core values because they're being very mean, horrible, whatever it may be to the other people on their team that they interact with. And also, you're going to lose those other team members. So this can happen as a salesperson. It can be a mid-level manager that they're the one that, while their numbers on paper may look good,
Mm.
but if you're having significant turnover for people who interact with them and report to them, they're the problem. And that's where you've got to hold yourself accountable to what your core values are, and you've got to protect that. And that means disciplinary action or removing somebody from the company. And that's a hard thing to do, especially if it looks like they're helping on sales, but the long-term implication is going to be worse.
Well, and let's talk about that. So the long-term implication, what it's costing you in that employee turnover is is the problem, right? So they may be bringing in lots of sales, but that money is directly going over here to be hiring new people all the time because people, it's a revolving door because of this one person. So you need to weigh out the core values there and say, okay, look, does this person actually meet my core values? Because if they don't, I probably should go ahead and let them exit and train these other people to be better at whatever it is, whatever this person was excelling at. Bring up the people who do meet your core values versus keeping that one toxic person around that's going to just cause revolving doors. And we've all seen it. We've all known the one person. Hopefully you've not ever been the one person. But we've all known that one person and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to, like, you avoid them in the hallway. You avoid, when you get their email, you're like, oh, what do they want? You know those people. And so if you know those people as the leader in your company, your employees also know that person. And so you need to identify them and weed them out, unfortunately.
Yep. And talking about weeding out, though, and this is something that's addressed in our books, is a lot of times once you start focusing on culture and holding people accountable to it, these toxic individuals will most of the time leave on their own. They will
Yeah.
realize I'm hitting resistance and I'm not willing to comply with what they want me to do. I'm tired of being called into the office and having, them remind me of what I said that was impolite and those type of things. And they get tired of it and they will leave.
It's that show your work thing from school, right? People, when you call them on the carpet and you're like, can you show us your work? They're just like, uh, and then they run. And that's probably one of my favorite things when I'm working with companies in this aspect is to see this system work and weed itself, the people out. They self-select out, right? They're like, I don't want to show my numbers. I don't want to be held accountable for the fact that I'm doing the same exact job as this person. But it reminds me of the movie Elf, right? When they're making the little deals and he's like, how many have you made? And he's like, 5. And they're like, he made 675, right? Like one person is taking a really long time to create the widget and the other person's like pumping out widgets. There's something wrong over here. And they're either milking the clock or those type of things. And when you say, okay, we're going to start measuring these things, the people who are milking the clock, they're out because it's gonna be revealed, right? And so you've got to start measuring and holding accountable. And we talk about that throughout the books, but we also talk about when it's time to weed out. That's what the next book is about. The book 4 in this series is the exit process. And so if it is time for someone to go, we walk you through that as well.
Yep. And one I think that's important to note on here is the majority of our team meets our core values. And notice that we said majority. Having a team that 100% is there on the core values, if you have more than, one person on your team, that's actually very difficult. And especially if you've established core values and you've begun this work on your culture after you've hired people, because you can't retroactively be like, oh, we're doing this now. You have to have this if you've already hired. And core values it's something that a lot of people can work on once you've established what it is. And this is where the development comes into with working with them. And you've got to have that communication. And this is where you give them feedback on, we've established these core values, top 3, you're knocking it out of the park. Number 4, we'd like you to work on this a little bit more. And here's how, and how can we support you in doing this? So notice that it says majority. It's never this beautiful utopia that everybody has the same core values and you're 100% there. So let's be realistic about it and know that that's probably not going to be the case, but you just need to have the majority so that the ship's moving in the right direction. You're just trying to help guide some other people to get there. Another big one, and I think because this is where we go from not just the culture piece and how we act. It's, are we in compliance with safety and standards for our industry? And these kind of things get ignored sometimes. And we want to make sure that our employees feel safe. And that's physical safety too. So warehouse, brick and mortar store, whatever it may be sure that you are, hitting all those things, that you're not expecting people to close up a large shop by themselves if it's in an unsafe area. And just
And it comes down to simple things too, like email compliance, right? If you're asking your people to email out things and you're not using a CRM system, there's no unsubscribe situation happening, you're asking them to blast these things out, you're not in compliance with what the world's asking. So brick and mortar, absolutely, that you should know the brick and mortar compliance. I mean, they're going to come knocking at your door, right? Probably. But with the online world, the remote world where we're headed, that's huge too. And people, I mean, I still get emails that I'm like, where is the unsubscribe button? And there isn't one. And I'm like, really? In this culture, people are still doing that. And it does happen. So don't be those people that are asking your people to do things that are unethical, unsafe, whatever it is, because people will leave. I remember specifically leaving a job where it was funded by the number of people that were in the program. And I got done with the program one day. I was teaching in the school system and came back and gave my sign-up sheet to my supervisor. And she said, you're going to have to add about 15 more names to that. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And she said, you're going to have to add 15 more names. That's not enough people attending. And I said, I'm sorry, I'll be right back. And I went to the bathroom and I was like, what did she just ask me to do? She's asked me to fudge the numbers and make up people's names to add to this so she can get funding. And so when I came back out of the bathroom, I said, today's my last day. I'm out of here. Like I just left immediately because I'm like, I am not going to be part of this. And you have to know that if you're asking your people to do things like that, I mean, you're not in compliance with anything, right? And so you're asking people to compromise their own values, and that's not healthy either. The one under that, right under that, Amanda, where you were,
yes,
the 10-year goal.
yes, I'm confident our culture is sustainable and supports our 10-year goal.
Yes. So how many companies out there don't even have a 10-year goal? That's the bigger thing, right? They don't even know where they're going. I think that if you don't have a 10-year goal, you need to start there and back up from there. And that's why earlier I said, if as a leader, as an owner, you need to take this assessment first before you start giving it to your people. Because if you haven't ever shared a 10-year goal with your people, they're not going to be able to answer this question, right? So you have to be able to answer the question for yourself first, and then share it with your people. But a 10-year goal is important. Where are you going? Where are you leading these people? You have to know that. And if you don't know it, you're not sharing it with them. So Yeah. Thanks for backing up on that one.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Because, and that goes back to, those core components, and have you established what the vision looks like and what does that mean in, and it's not just a 10-year goal. That is what we've listed there. Obviously, you should have goals for your quarters. You should have goals for your annual, maybe a 5-year goal. And a lot of that may depend on the type of industry that your business has. But you still have to think, it's not just, what are we getting done this week? Because then you're never going to feel like you're getting momentum and making those steps towards that big thing. And your 10-year goal will change over time, and you need to go back and assess that and be realistic about it and adjust it as needed, but you still need to have that bigger thing that you're working towards for in the long run. So
Well, that's where I think this is probably going a little deeper into that than we wanted to. But when you set a 10-year goal, you have to have the path to get there, right? You can't just say, well, in 10 years, we want to be a $15 million company, and you're currently sitting at 100,000 a year. Like, what's your path to success? And you have to map that out. Is it obtainable? And then once you do that and share that with your employees, that's where they will see, okay, this is why my, you know, requirements for sales went up. This is why my number of widgets I have to create went up. This is why whatever, because we're working towards this goal. This is why I need to be Johnny on the spot with my customer service, because our 10-year goal is to retain X number of clients every year, or our 10-year goal is this. Like, once they know the 10-year goal, then they know why what they're doing matters and why, how it applies.
well, and I think touching on what you just said, and this is something that needs to be said because I don't think everyone thinks about this. A lot of times when people are thinking about their 10-year goal and that kind of thing, it's not just money.
Right.
It's not. Now, yes, that should absolutely come into play. You need to be realistic about what you think that your financial figures will look like at that point in time. But it can be how many product lines you're successfully profitably selling. It could be how big of a team you've grown that's functioning well. Obviously, it's not just about, I need to hire 10 people by that point in time. That's easy, but do they have a function?
Yeah.
What's your retention rate? What's your, maybe you're wanting to shift to more for income coming in being affiliate sales. So let's, what does that percentage look like? And so while that is still a number, it's still not a bottom line. So think through, okay, it's not just about the dollar figure. What else are we needing to do? And what's that goal look like?
Yeah. And I think, the topic of today is retention. That's the book that we're focusing on, the retention process. And when you think about retention, if you were to ask some employees randomly on the street, like, what is your company's 10-year goal, or what is your 10-year goal within your company? They would probably say to not work there anymore. That's probably what most people would say. When they look down the road at 10 years, they're like, well, this is a stepping stone, or I don't want to be here anymore. I want to own my own business, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. So when you paint a picture of a 10-year goal for your company and share it with your employees, they can start taking ownership of that. And that helps your retention in the long run. When they feel connected and bind to a reason for being there, what is their reason for showing up every day? When they have that, and you start asking them what their 10-year, what is the company's 10-year goal? What is your 10-year goal with the company? Now they feel like, I do want to stay with the company for 10 years. I have a 10-year goal for the company that, I want to be moved up. I want to be a leadership. I want to grow my department. I want to create new SOPs. I want to do this. Maybe they're starting to buy in when you share your 10-year goal. But if you don't have one, their 10-year goal is probably to be out of here.
Yep. Excellent point. A couple things on this one that I want to point out. So the first line on this page is that our org chart is complete, accessible to the entire company, and kept up to date. What's an org chart? So this is what our version through the books is, and it's could be called an accountability chart. It can be an organizational chart. So for us, the OAR stands for organization, accountability, and responsibility. Because sometimes the charts just list the name and the title, and it doesn't go deep enough to really talk about what do they own, like what tasks and what is their responsibility and how are they held accountable to it? Who are they held accountable to and who's accountable to them? And that's where the chart gets into a little bit more detail with that. And that's also included in the book. And especially smaller companies, as you're growing, you want to be sure that you establish this, because this is we've talked about culture and how people feel about work. This actually really ties into it because if you hire someone new and let's say they report to Sally, but Johnny, who's in another department, continues to seem to be the one asking them to do stuff and knocking on their door but they're trying to get the work done that Sally told them to, but Johnny's kind of like always over their shoulder. So are they held accountable to Johnny? Is it written down anywhere? Is Johnny really the one who should be overseeing what they're doing? And then it creates confusion. And then the person's like, why? I feel like I have two bosses and not enough time.
And isn't that the worst feeling when I mean, most people don't want one boss, but much less two bosses. And then it's a horrible feeling. The other feeling on that same aspect is if you're new and you don't know who to ask the question to, right? You have a question and you're like, this question is about this department or this question, but you're like, who would answer this? I don't even know who's over that department. I mean, we have walked into companies like that before where we're like, who even does this in this company? And then you're sending out emails to like the whole company saying, who actually does this job? I mean, that's not a healthy culture because the person doing that job is like, what, why am I here? Nobody even knows what I do. Like, that's not healthy either. So you want to make sure that that org chart is filled out completely with what they're responsible for. It's the organization. I'll never forget, we had this one company and they literally put like the leadership people at the top, and then they made one big box and put everybody else's name in the one big box. And they called that an org chart.
And
An
it
organization.
wasn't one leader, it was two.
Right. With two people under that then, and then one big box. And I was like, I'm sorry, what about this says organization? There's no organization on this at all. And it was like, who knows who does in this box, much less who do any of these people report to? So you're saying all of these people, there was like maybe 20 people in the box, all of these people report to this one person or to these four people. Like there was no organization in the org
It's
chart. And
chaotic.
so chaotic, as was the company culture, as was the profitability, I mean, it was just, it painted the picture, right? And so your org chart should be an or chart, and it should paint the picture of organization, accountability, who's responsible for what. All of that should be there. So not only is it organized and people know who's doing what, but people are being held accountable. And when you have that picture, that's going to be the reflection of your company. We talked about looking in the mirror earlier. If you have it there spelled out, it's going to be a great picture of what's to come for your company because it's giving people a blueprint, really, of what to work from, right?
Mhm. And the follow-up one underneath that is that you have then also created like a cross-training org chart so that you're prepared for absences or exits. So if retention's an issue and you've got people turning over, how is that handled immediately? Do you have a plan for it? How do you just deal with absences? Not everybody can show up 100% of their work days during the year. Life happens, people get sick, and you've got to be able to, it shouldn't be a chaotic day every time somebody's sick. Now, there may be a quick scramble to figure something out. Absolutely. But if you're prepared with, okay, David does this and Johnny knows how to do it, but that's not what he does every day. David's out. We know we're going to go ask Johnny to step up and help with this. And when you have that plan, things are calmer. And every person that touches has a calmer day and they
Mhm.
leave there thinking better about their culture as opposed to, oh my gosh, today David was out and he's going to be out for 2 more days. And I just don't want to go to work because it is just crazy because nobody knows what to do.
And the leader looks like a fool because they're like, I don't even know who to ask to do what. Like, who am I supposed to, like, so and so's out. Well, who's doing? I mean, you shouldn't ask who's doing. You should know who's doing what in your company. And so it just having these things in place is going to make you shine even more as a leader.
Yes. And this one on here, and I think this is very indicative for small businesses to really look at, is our leadership team consists of qualified leaders that represent the core functions of a business. And so then we're talking marketing, finance, operations, human resources, technology, and sales. Those are really what they encompass. Now, those don't all have to be individual people, but as companies start out often as a solopreneur and they grow, often the natural mentality is I hire people for tasks. I hire people for tasks. I'm tired of doing this task. I don't have time for this task. I'm going to hire somebody to do the task. And a lot of times they don't stop and say, oh, now I have 20 people doing tasks, but I don't have anyone leading them.
Mhm. And then the other mistake they make is, they brought in Susie Q for doing their social media marketing. And she's been doing a great job, but now they need somebody else to do emails, and they bring in this person. And these people are doers, they're task-driven employees or 1099, right? Contractors. And then they're like, oh, you've been here the longest, you're going to lead people now. That is the worst mistake people can make, right? Just because someone's been there the longest does not make them a leader. You've got to, I mean, I love the word qualified in that statement because they've got to be a qualified leader. Just because they've been there the longest does not mean they want to lead people, does not mean they might want the paycheck if you're increasing their salary, but there doesn't mean they're qualified. And you're going to end up running your team in the long run. So you really need to look at, if you're bringing in people to do tasks like that, which a lot of startups do, you need to start looking at, are any of these people qualified to be leaders? Do they want to be leaders? Or are they, I mean, especially if they're contractors, they may be doing tasks for 9 other companies and they may not want to lead anyone in your company. So you need to decide, is this person a full-time employee? Can I make them a full-time employee and make them a leader? We have worked with companies and seen them put people on their leadership team in their C-suite that have absolutely no business being there, absolutely no business, salespeople who've been made leaders just because they sell the most doesn't mean they're a good leader.
And
Doesn't mean they're qualified to lead a team.
I think part of what we've also seen, especially with entrepreneurial start companies and move up from there, is they'll choose who's easy to work with.
Yeah.
And
A lot of visionaries will, a lot of CEOs will be like, well, I like so-and-so, so I'm just going to hire them, even though they're not qualified.
yep.
Yeah.
So like that person's been, she was doing the social media marketing.
She answers she's responsive to my texts and my constant
She's
checking.
quickly responsive to me. She never questions the work I give her. There's never any pushback.
Mhm.
I like her because she's easy to work with. We're going to make her a leader
Mm.
for other things. And that's actually the
That's the
work.
worst leaders. The
Yeah.
worst leaders.
You
Because if they're
need,
not pushing back with you, how are they leading their team?
yeah. How
How
are
are
they
they
leading their
pushing
team?
back?
Are they confident in their own leadership? Because a lot of times you can be given somebody a leadership position and something like this that they're just like, oh, yeah, I want the paycheck, sure, but I don't feel qualified for this. And are you trying to develop them into be a leader? And it doesn't mean that just because they're not qualified at the initial start, they may have that potential in them, but you've got to work with them on it and let them know what those expectations are. And another one in this specific thing is human resources. This is why we wrote these books. Most small businesses make their human resource hire their last hire. It is
Mhm.
handed to somebody else. It is not really owned by someone. Maybe the owner's trying to do it. Maybe nobody's trying to do it. And that's why the culture is bad. And that's why you're listening, because you're listening to something. So make sure you're hitting on all of the aspects.
Mhm.
Often smaller businesses get really focused on the sales, the marketing, the sales, the marketing, and then, oh yeah, finance, because sales are coming in now. And you forget the human resources and the operations too, because the operations really ties into your people as well. And you want to make sure your operations people aren't just about how many widgets can you crank out. It's also, is everybody happy while we're cranking out widgets and getting along and showing up and
The most optimized, streamlined system for the cranking out of the widgets. Yeah, what we see a lot with the HR is that it's the person who, like, you're sitting around with your leaders, right? So you've got your best salesperson there, your most attentive admin person, whoever these people are, maybe the paycheck lady who you've decided you're going to be our finance person, but really all she ever did was do a paycheck or something. You got these people in the room and you're like, okay, we need to hire somebody. And the first person to speak up says, well, I think, then you're like, great, you're over HR. Right. And they're like, well, I was just going to say, my neighbor might be a good fit. And they're like, perfect. You're great. You're going to take over the HR responsibilities. Can you create a job description? Can you do this? And they're like, no, yes. Okay. And then first, you're not paying them. You're not compensating for the position. There's no SOPs for the position. There's nothing. I mean, you're just like shoving it off to someone. And then before you know it, that person is now handling all the hiring for all the different departments as you're rapidly growing, and they're struggling. And that is exactly who this 4-part series is for. If you've been thrust into that seat, or you're about to thrust somebody into that seat, you get them the series, equip them with the tools that they need. It is amazing to me. We have seen companies take these books, work with it, and then we have actually seen on the other end some of their job descriptions come out, some of the ways that they're talking to their employees. And it's like, oh, they got it. They're using the tools, how simple it was, right? And so if you equip the people, they will use the right tools, but you've got to get it into their hands. And maybe that's you. You need these tools today. You can grab the tools, the books. There's a course and other things that, of course, are available, but get the tools. You need the tools to equip that person. Don't just thrust the first person who volunteers into the seat. Just don't.
Yes, definitely. I think, and there's two others on here, hitting on other topics is we have a realistic budget and we monitor it regularly. And then two down from that is that we track and measure metrics that honestly reflect the health of each department in our company. Now, the metrics can include financial data, but then can also be other things. But this is where in small businesses that are growing, trying to grow, but maybe there's something off and you can't quite figure out what it is. Well, are you tracking your metrics? Do you have a budget? Are you honest about it? Because if you're ignoring that aspect, that's likely hiding what the issue is. So if you've got
Absolutely.
a culture issue, if you really dig down into what the numbers are you truly assessing, we've hired this many people, this person should be producing this, which should then in turn bring in this dollar amount, but have we raised our price on something that we've been selling for 10 years? And if you haven't, but you've hired other people to do it, like, do you have a profit margin? Are you discussing those things? And oftentimes visionaries are scared of numbers. They like it when it's really positive, as we all do, but they may not want to discuss it. They may not want to have those hard conversations. And when you avoid the hard conversations, it just festers and it's going to become more chaotic. And this is where you've really got to be tracking these things. And it's not just you, your team needs to know that these things are tracked. Now,
Absolutely.
not everybody on the team needs to see 100% of what the numbers are. There does come a point where you need to have some documents that are private to only leadership team or whatever it may be that includes some salary information. But everyone in your team should know like what a quarter goal is, if you've met it or not. They should know what their own metrics are for what their goals are. They should know what the department next to them, what their goals are, and if they're meeting them or not. You've got to have open and honest conversations about data.
Yeah, and I think we've seen two extremes here across the board. We see visionaries who either just don't count metrics at all, they don't measure a thing, and they're just willy-nilly in it, like, oh, we got this big client came in for $100,000. We're rich this month. Oh, we don't this month. We all need to go sell more. Oh, we're right. So you got that person. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the person that's like, we are going to track every single thing that you do, like every breath you take while you're in my office. And we have seen some crazy metrics, like people make up the most crazy, it's like, why are you tracking that? And so I really think the key phrase here is honestly reflect the health of each department in your company. If you can't look at this and say, why are we measuring this? What is it telling us? If you can't tell what it's actually measuring and why you need to know that number, you probably don't need to track it. Like there's things that are really measuring the direction of a company. And then there's things that are just like, no, I don't care how many emails you answered today. Like nobody needs to know that. But if it's your customer service department, that may matter. Or it may matter how many of the same types of questions they're getting on a regular basis, or are they getting the same issue, those types of things. But across the board, really look at, everybody should have a number in their company that they're working towards, that they're tracking, and that they're reporting on a regular frequency, whether that's weekly or monthly, depending on how your company goes, what you're selling, what you're working with. They should be tracking some metric on a regular basis and have a determined frequency. So they know that every XYZ, they're showing up with this number, whether that's weekly or monthly, quarterly. They need to know what they're tracking and what they're showing up for. And then whatever that looks like in your company, have them know that. If you can't come up with a metric, that's might be where you need to reach out. Amanda does HR consulting. You might want to reach out, just say, look, this is what we've got going on. What metrics should we be measuring? Like, we don't understand what's going to actually move us in the right direction, what we should be tracking, what is the health numbers that we should be looking at. It's really important. It's really, I can't believe some of the stuff that we've seen come across. It's like, what are you doing measuring that? Like, that has nothing to do with anything. But one of the things to measure is, quality control issues. That's huge. If you keep having issues with quality control in your company, whatever it is you sell, whatever it is, if it's a service product and you keep having people coming back and they're complaining about the service, whatever it is, that costs you money. So it may not be an income producing activity that, you're measuring the revenue, but you're measuring the losses. What is that costing you in the long run by having people have to go back and answer the same question all the time, having people, have to fix the problem all the time? Those kind of metrics is what you need to be measuring. And it's not just about like, how many did we sell? How many did we sell? And that's the most common metric people want to know, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah. Those sales numbers are easy. It's when you get into other departments that, aren't revenue generating departments, but they're uber important to your business, and you've got to be able to still attach a number to something.
Yeah.
So those are some of the highlights that we suggest for the assessment. And then the thing there is, now what do you do? So we suggest with this assessment, now take it, craft it to be more yours. You want it to be unique to your company. Once you can get better data out of it, right? Like if you're just doing a blanket thing that you haven't even really truly gone through each of the things, you customize it for your company. But then also you want your employees to know that you just didn't grab something online, download it, print it out, and hand it to them without reading it. Because then they're like, this doesn't even make sense. We have something like this in our company, but this isn't what we call it. And when they see those inconsistencies, they're going to see that you really didn't put a lot of effort into even wanting to know their opinion on the culture. So be sure that you do customize it for your company. So
yeah, words like the org chart or
yeah,
SOPs, if you're not using those terms in your company, Ripple communication, rally list, if you're not using those terms, that your people are going to be like, where did they pull this from? And it's really important to customize it. Use the language that your company uses. It's part of your culture.
yes,
Use this language.
yes. So each of these statements are supposed to be ranked from 1 to 5, and then you go through and you tally them. And in a perfect utopia, and someone went through all of these and they gave everything a 5, you would have 150 on this, which is highly unlikely. If you do, wow, but highly unlikely. There's always going to be some rooms for improvement. But really think through, do you need a lot of improvement, or you need to identify what those gaps are, or is it just some small tweaks that need to be done? And stop sharing so we can speak more on this.
Yeah, we want to get questions too. If anybody has questions, drop them because we're almost to the top of the hour. We'll make sure
close to the top of the hour. So drop your questions. So give this to everybody. They're all not going to have the same score. So then you create an average, and that's really the number that you want to look at. Now, obviously, you want to look at your outliers. Did you get a lot of close to perfect scores and then a lot of really bad scores? And if that's the case, what department was that? Because it's not the individual necessarily that's the problem who filled out the culture assessment. It's who do they interact with? Who is leading them? Who are they held accountable to? And really dig in and figure out what those gaps are. So as we started with this, don't ask for opinions unless you're going to act on them. So
well, and it may be that one person. Like if you get that one outlier, if everybody in your company is giving you pretty fair average scores, and you have that one person that either ranks you super high, shows they probably don't care, or super low, they may be the toxic person in your company. That may be the sign that they don't see anything positively. They don't meet our core values at all. They're just looking for all the holes. They're just looking. So if you do have that one person, you might take a look. But more often we see that it's pretty average across the board, and then you can do the math on, which way to improve or not, which way you need to improve, I guess, how much you need to improve.
And I think, and obviously this will depend on the size of your company. One person shouldn't be the only one looking at these results. It needs to be a team. and leadership team or partners or whatever it may be, so that you can really get input from other people, because this is still where, like, looking at it, in you may have a personal bias about one of these items and it's ranked low and you're just like, oh, they're just being dramatic, it's fine. But you might need somebody else on your leadership team to help hold you accountable for, like, no, this was consistent across the board. We really need to talk about it. We need to come up with a plan. And a lot of times it's going to take two people. You've got to have someone who's willing to call you on the carpet and say, we can't ignore this anymore. Like, something's got to give, or that one line item is going to start impacting the others. And that's
Mhm.
where you start losing people.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of all this work is retention. And because we want to save you the money in the long run, right? That's the biggest problem with companies that are growing with employees is they don't understand the cost of every employee. And the retention, investing in that employee is a good thing because you're not going to have to spend time to rehire someone and retrain someone and all the risk involved with that. So often people don't understand the risk that's involved when you're hiring someone and you're pouring into them, right? You've got client relationships that have been developed with your employees, and if an employee walks out, you may lose clients over it. If an employee is just stale, and you may see clients being stale, right? You may see, well, they're not even interacting because nobody else is interacting, so why? So you really need to take a look at that and see what it's costing you in the long run, and then this assessment, take it personally first, like we said, and then see where you can apply it across your company, depending on the size of your company. Take some honest looks and ask yourself, it's worth the investment of time to do this. It's not going to cost you a lot of money to do it. And so we encourage you to do that. And when you send this out to your employees, make sure that you let them know what the reason is and give them a time frame of how, when you want it back by. And that, you don't want to have to chase it down. So make sure you give them a proper way to turn it in, whatever that is for your company. If you're a paper printing company and you're going to print it out and hand it to them, have somewhere where they can drop it in, that type of thing. If you're digital, have a digital way to capture this information and be able to look at it digitally. Because you want it to be easy, just like with anything else in your company, you want it to be easy so that it actually gets done and is efficient for your company.
Yeah, because if there's friction on that, then you're going to be less likely to get it turned in, or people are going to be frustrated when they're filling it out, whatever it may be. And then give yourself a deadline on the leadership team, whatever it may be. When are we going to have the data compiled? When are we going to discuss it? Go ahead and have that date on your calendar that, all this is supposed to be due by the 1st. We're planning to sit down, so and so is going to collect the data and have that done by the 5th. We all have 3 days to review it before we sit down to talk about it. So everyone is fully prepared and has had an opportunity to really dig into what it looks like. And then on the 10th, we're having a meeting and we're going to list the worst issues. We're going to list the top ones too, because look at what you've done well and celebrate those wins. And also be like, okay, all the items we've done impacting this, we got to keep doing. And how can we replicate that into some of the other items that maybe didn't score as well?
And then the next date to set on the calendar is reporting the information out, reporting the data back out to your employees. And that's why capturing the wins is so important, because you want to make sure that you're not just coming with the negative, right? You're coming with the celebration of the wins as well. Report that back out. So if you're, like she said, on the 10th, you're saying, okay, we're going to meet on the 10th, we're going to discuss it. Maybe a month from that date, you're going to have an employee appreciation meeting, or an email goes out that you're going to say, here's the results, or whatever that is for your company, whatever the kind of communication it is, but you want to make sure that's communicated well. One company that we worked with, one of the things that we found that worked really well, so we happened to have a guy on staff that was great on video. He was an actor by trade, and so he was just fantastic on video. And we had him do recordings for the company, and that worked really well. There was a lot of engagement. He was encouraging. His personality came across well on screen. And so if you have somebody like that, you could record that, report the data back in that kind of way as well. What you don't want is some boring CEO going, here I am with the report from the statistics from no, like, you want to bring it with the energy, represent your culture well. So if your culture is high energy and encouraging, you want to bring that energy in this report as well. You don't want to make it seem like a negative. You don't want to make it seem that your culture stinks and we're here to fix it type of thing. You want to go in with the most optimistic view on this as you can, and then report in the same way.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And that was a good one. It's how are you talking to them? How are you communicating it? Not just, well, I sent an email out with the data, it was reported to them.
Yeah.
That's not engaging, which is the point of all this. We want to keep them engaged, and as they're engaged, they will stick around. So I've dropped all the links for the book, the course, and HR consultation in the comments here. And if you have questions later, you can always reply to the email that was sent out. And if you joined us late, an email will go out with the tools and the replay, so you can get caught up on what happened at the beginning of it.
Great. And you'll get the worksheet from today as well. So
Correct. So thank you everyone for joining us. And that's it for today.
Thank you, everyone.